Hi YouTube, thought I'd just take a little time to talk to you about this Vox NightTrian that I purchased a while ago. So this is one of the Amplug series. Had a bit of an issue with the fact that the batteries were seeming to last 5 minutes, but not literally. They were only lasting a few days maybe in standby mode. So I thought there might be something a bit strange going on. In fact, I don't know if you can see, but one of the problems was on the positive side of the connectors in here, where the actual battery wasn't making proper contact. So I don't know if that's because the Vox designers have not allowed enough space for the positive end of the battery to go into. On the AA cells, this little positive tip here is typically around about 0.8 mil if you look like things like Energizer and such, and the plastic recess before it touches the contact is quite deep, so I've actually bent these back out so it makes good contact. Okay, so I've got the Amplug set up on my bench, powered from a 3-volt DC supply, and as you can see from this highly accurate 10mm, there's 22 milliamps, nearly 23 milliamps being drawn. This is just with a pair of headphones. Now this is in the FX position. If I move it into the normal position, so no FX, the current is relatively unchanged. If I move to the standby mode, this is where it gets very interesting. Standby mode, 109 milliamps. Okay, that's meant to be in standby, that's meant to be off and not taking any current whatsoever. But I'm looking at my power supply, and of course, what have I set my current limit at? Well, approximately 110 milliamps. I'm current limiting, and if I was to just push the current up, all I'm going to do is shove more current through. It's like the standby mode is short-circuiting the batteries. I have never seen something as strange as that. I can only think this unit has a fault. A standby switch should just disconnect the batteries. It's ridiculous. I can't understand what's going on, so I'm going to actually stop this right now. If you think it's something wrong with the meters, well, no, there's 100 milliamps going through this. My power supply is in current limit mode. Clearly there's something wrong. We're going to have to take the Amplug apart and find out. Well, I could send it back to the manufacturer, but where's the fun in? Okay, so I've opened up the Amplug now, and let's have a look what we've got. At first look, there's not a right lot to it, but then again, what would you really expect? Now, all the circuitry appears to be powered by a DC-DC converter. It's not just a linear regulator. In here there's a inductor, and on the bottom is a switcher of some description. Not particularly familiar with it, could look that up if you want. But I've got this in the on position, measuring across the input terminals, and we're measuring a few meg. But if I go and put this in the on position, and sorry, in the standby position, oh dear, no ohms, short circuit. This Amplug is short circuiting the battery. No, wrong, sorry, this is all wrong. So we're going to have a look around and see if we can see anything obviously wrong. Okay, so I've had a bit of a drink and recharge, and I've had a little look at the connections in the circuit. I think I've got to the bottom of what's going on with our Amplug. So this slide switch is configured such that in this standby position, the highest furthest away from us, I'm going to show you, this pin and this pin are connected together. When you move it to the middle position, this pin and this pin are connected together, and then when you move it to this final position, this pin and this pin are connected together, and the same is happening, is reflected on the other side. So this is a 3-position switch, where essentially these two, this is a common for this row and this is the common for this row. Now the issue seems to be that this being the positive lead from the battery is actually connected to this pin here. So when it's in this bottom position here, it's connecting the power supply. When it's in this position here, it's connecting the power supply here. I guess they're probably the same position for both. But when it's in this position here, which is the off mode, it connects this pin to this pin. Now I really don't know if you can make this out, but this pin here is actually connected via a tiny track straight to the ground plane. So yeah, positive volts from the battery, negative volts from the battery, lots of current. So that's been happening while my batteries have been plugged in. So I'm surprised this switch is actually working at all, but it is. I have tested the connections changing with my multimeter, but I am surprised they haven't managed to weld together. I've been very surprised that my batteries, rechargeable batteries, last as well. Certainly explains why the first set of batteries that I put in didn't work the next day, and my rechargeable batteries didn't work a few days later when I tried. Okay, so I think I'm going to actually feed this back to Vox. I mean, I presume I bought this off the internet. I bought it off a reputable seller that I've used before on the old eBay, but it came in all the Vox packaging that I was familiar with. It was around about the same price. I can only think that it's either a really bad design decision, or it's a batch that shouldn't have ever been out in the open, or it's a clone by a bunch of Muppets, essentially. I think the simplest solution for me, if it works, is to just simply remove this track here, and hopefully from the ground plane there, that should start working fine. So I'm actually going to try that out now. Okay, so I'm actually going to revise my decision. So if you remember, I've just said I thought this tiny slither of track, ground plane here, was connecting to this pad here. I don't actually think that was the case. Maybe if I'd have had my magnifying glass, or if I'd have been at work and I could use a microscope, I may have noticed this, but unfortunately I don't have any of those such tools at home. So it did actually look like it was short. It may have been. I certainly have trimmed back that tiny little track there with a scalpel, but what I did notice when I eventually had to take the chip out because the short was there and I was wondering whether it was connected on the other side, is the short was a solder short straight between the two pins. So it would have caused that pin to be connected to ground erroneously. So it looks like it may have been a solder short all along between these 2 points, which obviously isn't great. Obviously everything on here is quite low voltage, but with these type of connections, solder shorts are always a possibility. Perhaps the routing could be a little bit different. Certainly you got to question whether you actually want the solder mask. Even solder masking off this may have been a better idea. You've certainly got plenty of wires through there anyway. You don't really have to rely on on a slug of solder for anything. It's all quite low current, so maybe it was a short crying out to happen, but that seems like that may have been the problem. So what we're going to do is bob the switch back in and see if we have the same issues. Okay, so we've put together our Vox Amplug. After we've removed the short, I'd had measured the resistance across the battery terminals before I put everything together, and now you see this is in standby mode and we have no current being taken. Phew! Hey, after all that. So the 20 milliamps when it's on, and nothing when it's on. Let's have a look, see if there's any microamps still there. Okay, so we're now connected power supply in series with multimeter. That's also overranging there. It's on and that's off. No microamps. I don't know if you can really see the display there, but no microamps. So could have sent it back to Vox. Nah, fixed now. So there you go. If you are experiencing issues such as I did, low batteries that seem to last, batteries that don't last a day, once you put it in standby mode, then maybe you've got a short on the switch like I did. There you go. Goodbye.